I grew up, both of my parents grew up in Erie, and they both grew up in the Russian Orthodox Old Believer tradition. So there's only like 5 of these churches in America. And people say, well, there was a Russian Orthodox church near me. It's like, okay, but this group believes they are the first Christian church. So someone wrote a lovely article about me in the book, and he called it a sect. And my first cousin is the priest currently in the Erie church. And my mother said, oh, don't show that to your cousin. I said, why? And she said, they're not a sect. Everybody else came from them. So that kind of ownership and fierce fundamentalism was what my parents grew up in, but they also didn't understand it because the church is conducted in Slavonic. So, Catholics who went to Latin Mass, nobody speaks Latin, but the church services were in Latin. So nobody speaks Slavonic. It's a liturgical language. But they didn't even speak Russian. They were both born in America, and that first generation, it was better to speak broken English than Russian. So, their parents only spoke Russian when they didn't want them to know what was going on. And so that's their heritage. And I knew all my grandparents, all 4 grandparents. They lived 5 blocks apart. Go 5th and Parade to 1st and Parade. The church is on 1st Street. We would walk from 5th and Parade, where we stayed with my mom's parents, to 1st and Parade. And in those 5 blocks, 4 of my dad's 10 siblings lived. My dad is the youngest of 11. So his mom marries at 14, has her first baby at 15, has a baby every 2 years, except for the year that she had identical twins. My dad is the youngest at the 11th. And she lost her citizenship for marrying my grandfather, who was born in Russia. Nobody knows this story about America. Nobody knows 90% of the stories about America. We're so aspirational and haughty in our estimation of ourselves and as a country. And there's just a lot of crummy chapters that need to be included and reminded. And this is one of them. So they would say growing up, it was no secret. They would say, Ma lost her citizenship for marrying Pa. And it was like ring around the rosy. I mean, I just heard it a lot. And then one day you say, what does that mean? Because people, and as I was writing this book and I would tell people, they'd say, that didn't happen. Well, I'm here to tell you it did. There were, 15 years in American history, 1907 to 1922, where women only, American women who married foreigners, lost their citizenship. And then my mom's dad had black lung. They all worked in the mines at one point and in Mariana. Then they get their way to Erie. Erie has a lot of industry, and Mariana has a church, and Erie has a church. Detroit, a couple other places, not very many. So he had black lung, and he was allergic to everything. He's very much, Victor in the book is very much based on him. Very sweet man. And my grandmother on that side, she was the one who marched into the foreman's office and demanded that he be paid in cash rather than script. She was not going to shop at the company store. But she was also the one as a little girl who was born in America, and her parents had left 3 girls behind. So, I just mashed all that together, moved it around in time, and told a story I wanted to tell, which was about the first American born. It had to be first person. So that's another thing I'll say to people that I help with their books, that every decision you make is the whole book. So, they'll say, oh, it just came to me that way. It's like, well, then you have to kind of justify it for the book. So it has to be first person, because she keeps saying, I am here and you don't see me. I am American. Like people would say to me in early drafts, oh, this little immigrant girl. And I would say, well, I'm not doing my job right, because she is not an immigrant. She is born in America, and nobody sees her as American. And, she thinks about it all the time. It's like, well, why would they? I live on Russian Hill. I'm Russian Orthodox. My parents, but I mean, just to read the very first line of the book, it's like, how could I show you that she's American? What's the most American trait? So can I read the first paragraph? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
I hoped the sisters I'd never met would never join us. And when they did arrive, I wanted to send them back. That's how American I am. As far as I was concerned, my parents had left the two of them behind and come here to give birth to me. What do you want, a medal? My little brother used to ask. He was born here, but I was born first. What's the most American thing? That everybody else, the gates should now close and everybody else should, be sent back. So she's so proud of it. And then you see how people treat her and what happens to her. So it had to be first person because this religion is so unusual. Even people who think they know it have not seen it. And my editor of my first 3 books turned it down. He said, I don't want this book from you. And he said, you really should go back to your Willa Cather and you should try third person. And I said, you're wrong. So when you try third person, it sounds like a National Geographic special. I mean, again, I'll just go back. I'll read you the second paragraph or the beginning of it. Where I was born isn't how I was raised. Though I hailed from Marianna, Pennsylvania, I was brought up hearing that wolves talk and old believers rise from the dead, that a good woman can make soup from a stone and a good man's snot is black with coal dust. I'm American, so I figured I didn't have to take what comes the way Ma and Pa did. Our kind of Russian Orthodox is called old believers because they don't believe in making changes or choices, but I aim to choose some things for myself. That included a life away from the mines, where most of the men who aren't crushed or gassed end up dead from drink. So now you know what she's up against. It's 1908. So the time period, the religion, and the family, everything's against her having any choice. It's a book about a kid who wants a choice in her life. It was really hard because I had never written historical fiction before, and I had never written first person. So Teddy Roosevelt is president when Teddy Roosevelt is president. You can't just make that up. And the religion is the religion, and it has some really strong rules. And I am neither dissing it, nor I'm not fictionalizing it. I'm trying to capture it, and I'm trying to capture her struggle within it of being. She is of Russian ethnicity. She is Russian Orthodox of the Old Believers. So that was really challenging. History existing was challenging for me as a fiction writer who believes that you have the right to make anything up. So that was hard. And I wanted it to end where it ends. And a lot of people said, take her forward in time, take her later. What becomes of her? And I wanted to show her the fix she was in